Welcome to the Happy in the Mess podcast. We are your hosts, Marlena, Cheri, and Matthew. We are therapists and coaches, and we want to share our own stories with you, as well as the wisdom, insights, and tips we've learned along the way. Thanks for tuning in to this episode.
Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of Happy in the Mess. Today we're talking about gratitude. I know, cue the eye roll and the groan, but there are plenty of benefits of gratitude, and that's why we're talking about it today, because we're trying to teach our listeners how to be happy in the mess. As usual, if you're new to our channel, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. But this episode is really helpful to people who need to get out of a funk, depression, feeling stuck. So please share it with someone who may need to hear this topic today. We intend for it to be helpful, and we love to hear your comments. If you like more content like this, let us know. And we have with us today Matthew Morgan, the Misfit and Refuge Coach, and Cheri Timko, the relationship coach, and I am Marlena, the singles coach. And if you'd like to work with us, we are real people, real therapists. We do real work. You can find our links in the description box. So now moving on to what is gratitude and how do we feel grateful when we're struggling? But let's just kick it off with what is gratitude? I mean, describe what that is. What does that mean to each of you?
This almost sounds like it's almost hard to define because I think we all have an idea in our head of what gratitude is, appreciating something, saying thank you. I think it is slowing down and taking stock of the good things in life because our brains are wired to focus on the negative stuff. And so bringing into focus that stuff that we kind of blend into the background because it isn't problematic.
Very true. We do have negativity bias in the brain, so it does take an act of the self-command muscle to come back into thinking about something we're grateful or appreciative of. What about you, Matthew?
Absolutely. And I think Cheri's absolutely spot on. I would just add in there, it's an attitude with an action associated with it. Because a lot of times, again, going back to that bias, like we have this negativity bias and it just rolls that way. And we can think gratitude, but there is just something about expressing it and having an action of gratitude, whether it's an appreciation, if it's a random act of kindness, speaking positivity, and it can be to somebody else, it could be to yourself, but it has to be expressed because otherwise, I think if it just stays in there, it gets lost. It's that expression of gratitude that makes it what it is.
That negativity bias is functional. Like we have it for a purpose. Our brains are looking for that problem so that they can focus on it and then clear it up. And so we're talking about like balancing that because that can overtake everything. But it's a good process that we have that negativity bias. Otherwise, when there's a problem, we would ignore it and it would take over and become a bigger problem.
Well, this gets into like, I really love what you both shared. On the one hand, we don't necessarily want to follow the negativity spiral and start circling the drain with stuff. On the other hand, it is important to be alert to negative emotion so that we can alter course or do something different or what have you. But how do we know when we're using gratitude to do what I call like spiritual bypassing, which is like, well, I'm just going to feel grateful for whatever's going on in the situation so that I don't really have to look at the problem or change anything or fix anything, versus when is it a good time to start utilizing that practice because it's no longer beneficial for me to keep, beating that dead horse or looking for that problem. Because I mean, it's sometimes hard to understand when is it time to feel your feelings and when is it time to like shift over into a more positive thinking space.
I guess I would have to say this is both and, not either or. I think about gratitude as the process of, all right, I think there's this idea that gratitude is about ignoring the bad and only focusing on the good. And I think of it as our brains are going to be focused on the negative, so bringing the positive next to it. So you get a clearer, more accurate view of what your world is like. And so there are situations where it's important to focus on the problem because there's something that you can do about it and fix it. but you still need to be focused on the positive stuff in that situation, just as maybe a counterbalance to it. But then there are times when you can't fix that problem, and dwelling on it and focusing on it to the exclusion of other things really is harmful to the self. So both and.
Mm.
One of my favorite exercises on this when I have clients who are struggling with anxiety or big emotions over something, be it a job interview or something like that. A lot of times I'll tell them, I'm like, spend 2 minutes and just let the brain go wild. Think about every negative thing that could come out of this situation. Negative, big unquote, like your worries. What are your anxieties? Spit it all out. And then I want you to give that equal amount of time to thinking about all the good things that could come out of it, and the positive feelings associated with it. And a lot of times it is that latter part that's harder, but we're leaning into what you were saying, Cheri, is a both and situation. We need to worry about we do need to worry about some of these things. We do need to put these anxieties out, but we don't need to keep spiraling through them. And so a lot of times showing that gratitude can kick us out of that spiral and activate the resiliency that's there, the other traits that may be there, what assets somebody may have to deal with a particular problem.
This
And
reminds me of a scene that I love in a show. This Is Us, and it's a show of different couples and how they cope with different things. And there is a couple, and periodically, when they're really overwhelmed, they'll meet in kind of a corner of the house, and they'll both just throw out their worst case scenarios, just the absolute worst things that can happen, and they give voice to that, and it comes out and you're like, oh right, that probably is not what's going to happen. But if it's just stuck in your head, like, then you dwell on it. But Matthew, I love that idea of giving that equal time to what's the best that could happen, or what is the best that has already happened, and being able to balance that, like look at the two extremes and be able to be like, okay, yeah, there's good and there's bad in this, and which is more important. A lot of times that good part is more important.
And what I like about that too is like letting the person vent, or letting yourself vent first, like address the negativity, because that's what probably most present and is blocking the ability to see anything else. So until that gives also expression, like you said, Matthew, then, but ending on the gratitude to then now redirect to be like, okay, can we find, the good in this? Or, because that's what ultimately we all want to feel happy. I mean, ultimately we all want to feel less depressed, less anxious, hopefully less suicidal, or not at all. Like, we all want to feel better in general. And so ending on that note, they've also done some research that shows just the act of searching for gratitude in your brain helps rewire it and change it and makes you feel positive. Even if you can't find it, if someone just asks, what are you grateful for? The act of taking that pause to look in your brain and find something is actually beneficial without even coming up with something, which I find just fascinating. I've learned so much about the benefits of gratitude on mental, emotional, and physical well-being. I'm curious, what have you all learned around this, or what do you know around what is beneficial about it?
The research that I've heard is that anyone who spends 30 days on a gratitude practice, listing 3 things that they're grateful for at the end of the day, it reduces their depression, makes them more satisfied with their lives. I think that can be extrapolated to lots of other things, because I think that it doesn't just help with depression. It also helps with, kind of the ups and downs of life, or building a relationship with someone. One of the power up skills that I like to teach couples is to find the gratitude in the problem. And if you can do that, it will shift how you're thinking about that problem. Doesn't make it not a problem. It just makes it, I don't know, more in capable of handling it, more manageable. Those are the words I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The research, one of the statistics I remember reading is that spending 5 minutes a day in gratitude increases your happiness by 10%, long-term happiness by 10%, which is a tremendous rate of return. I mean, most people who are coming to therapy or coaching, they're inherently doing it because there's an unhappiness with where they're at. And if I look at somebody, and we mentioned the eye roll at the beginning, and I get this a lot, right? But if I say, hey, here's this practice that will increase your happiness, if I could increase your paycheck by 10% by spending 5 more minutes at work, would you do it? And most of us would be like, sign me up, like I can do that.
Yeah.
And so this is just one of those practices, I think, that it increases happiness, and then of course that side effect, it increases resilience. It reminds us of who we are. And in the neurodivergent community, I think a lot of times we suffer a big blind spot when it comes to this, because we're told so many times that we're wrong, or we don't fit in, or that this doesn't work. And when you can show gratitude for that and just say, hey, this is our, whatever it is, this is our superpower, right? It might be weird. It might be that I can hear these particular sounds, or I can think about things different ways, or I can remember movie quotes from everything that I've seen in the last 25 years. But those also add quality and value. And the more you show value or show appreciation to that, I think the more it settles in and makes us feel like less of a loser and more like this is something that is unique about me, and it's wonderful, and I'm okay the way I am.
10% is a huge amount when you consider that we tend to fall back to our baseline.
Well, and also, the research that I read back in grad school around gratitude, we were studying kind of geriatric populations and whatnot, and people actually live longer with a higher quality of life if they scored higher in gratitude scales, whatever those were. And so I thought that was really interesting. Like, you can actually lengthen the course of your life if you're more grateful. And I've heard about the 5 minutes a day. I've heard like writing it down can be really helpful. And I have also given clients who are really struggling. There's a practice that I've done many years ago, and I still use it every now and again, is write 3 pages every single morning, like full on letter size pages of gratitude. And then when you run out of things, that's when you start looking at your problems and finding the gratitude in those too. And it is such a transformative practice, because as a good mentor used to tell me, until I love and accept exactly where I am, nothing's going to change. And that includes kind of loving and accepting my problems. I know that's a little controversial, but I mean, gratitude really has a way of transforming the way we look at things and the way actually people respond to us. That's other interesting research on gratitude, is that when we're grateful, people trust us more. We're more likable. We've all been around people who complain a lot, and like, we don't want anything to do with them. I mean, when people come out with that toxic, negative energy, those vibes, we all want to take a step back. But when people are grateful and are showing, whether they're talking positively about someone else, we also trust them more. And so the same is true within relationships. Cheri, I'm sure you could speak more to that. But yeah, it increases our self-esteem. Again, it keeps suicidal thoughts at bay, improves our romantic relationships and our friendships, social support. I mean, the list goes on and on. Including becoming more optimistic and spiritual, and makes us more giving. It reduces materialism, even enhances our optimism, makes us more effective managers, reduces impatience. I mean, there's just like, this is such a wonderful small and such a doable tool. But I do want to go back to when it's difficult. When it's difficult to find the gratitude, I have often instructed clients, can you tell me about things that you liked today? And that has a very similar effect. Just, can you identify something you like? Give me 3 things. And that came out of a social worker who worked with me once when I was struggling. I was like, oh, I can find 3 things I like every day. And that started to shift my attitude. So what is it when we're using gratitude as a weapon? What does it look like when we think we're being grateful, but in fact we are not?
Well, working with couples, I often hear that gratitude of, well, if you did this all the time, I'd be much happier. And they attach that to a gratitude. So thank you for doing this. Could you do it all the time? And that really is a criticism. That's really not expressing gratitude.
Yeah, passive aggressive a little too. Yeah.
And I think, going back to what we said, if we're using it to ignore negative, so it's a weapon against other people, it can be, but it also can be a weapon against ourselves.
Yes.
And a lot of times I'll hear it in terms like, well, it could be worse, which is, I mean, and I can understand that. I can appreciate it as, there's that sense of like, it's almost a gratitude, but really not. I mean, and especially if you happen to be the person that may have it a little bit worse, it doesn't feel good for that person.
Mhm.
So I think, using it to insulate ourselves from the problems and say everything's fine. I think that's where it can really be weaponized. And I
Mhm.
remember listening to a speaker who was talking about his, positive approach, and he was in the blistering cold, and he just kept telling himself, he's not cold, he's not cold, he's not cold. And I was like, I'm glad that works for you, but my brain does not work that way. Like my brain knows my feet are numb and doesn't feel good, but I'm going to be grateful for little things and be grateful for those steps or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
So again, I think that's just, it's all about the entire picture, the entire spectrum of our emotions, not just focusing in on one aspect.
Yeah, I really haven't liked when gratitude too has been used in comparison, like, oh, well, like when you say it could be so much worse, or look at so and so, they don't have whatever. And it's not really, it doesn't lift my spirits to look at someone else's misery. Like that's not usually I mean, on occasion that might work, but generally speaking, I feel like that's not the best way in my own experience to practice my own gratitude. Is looking at how worse off someone else is. I'm just like, well, they shouldn't be worse off either. This is, yeah, kind of like exacerbates the unhappiness. So I'm curious if both of you, or what has worked for you as far as maybe in your own lives or with clients in particular, as a way to keep up the 30 days, or what practices have you utilized to carry on with gratitude?
Well, there's writing down 3 things once a day, often at bedtime, or linking it with another event is really helpful. A lot of times, families will practice this at dinner time, where everyone will go around the table and talk about a highlight of their day or something that they're grateful for. Um, I personally, when I get stuck, I start at the beginning of my day and I try to drill into the nitty gritty. So, like at the beginning of my day, I am grateful for my bed. I'm grateful for the roof over my house. I'm grateful that we have clean water. I'm grateful that we have electricity. I'm grateful for a car that runs. And I just try to drill down into those details so that I really am looking at my life and not ignoring a lot of things that, maybe not in comparison other people don't have, but that make my life better, make my life run more smoothly.
Mhm. So just as a reflection, almost as soon as you wake up, Cheri, you begin to think about the things you have and what you're grateful for.
Yeah, or if starting at the beginning of my day helps me, because then I kind of walk through my day and it helps me pick out those details that I wouldn't have noticed in the moment.
Mhm. Yeah.
For us, I think it's an end of the day. We have our it really has become ritual, but it's more than just empty. It's something we really try to do as a family, where we all get together. We all have a prayer time, just for us, because it follows our spiritual traditions, and not everybody agrees with that, and that's okay. But I think for us, we really incorporate this gratitude into there, and it always, we try to put that as the first part of everything. Is just a gratitude for what you were saying, Cheri. Like we have a home, we have vehicles, we have, AC, which is, in the blistering hot days, it's, that's a gratitude to have. And um, so we try to really just kind of wrap that up, and as a family, and that way we kind of all can echo with that, and sometimes we'll chime in as well, or the others will chime in as well, and just, hey, let's talk about what we're thankful for. And it really does, at the end of the night, I think that's a great just kind of wrap up, and it's a great way to just remember, like, hey, even though it might have been a bad day, there were still good things that came through it.
Yeah. I love that family practice and being around the dinner table. And I love the starting your day with it. I absolutely think that a morning routine, a good solid morning routine into a positive place, can be so helpful and sets up the tone and the temperament for the day. I've been practicing shameless plug for this book, and I don't gain any commissions but Rhonda Byrne's The Magic, and it's all about gratitude. And she talks about doing 10 blessings as soon as you wake up, write down 10 blessings or 10 gratitude things. And in there, she mentions too how cultures around the world have practiced gratitude for things that have yet to come, for the rain or for fertility or for, the river to flood or what have you. And I've really thought about that as also we can be grateful for the things that have yet to show up as well, for the sun, for the sun coming up. And maybe it's not so like impossible things per se, like thank you for the lottery. Although if that's what you want to do, go for it. But I like this idea too, that like we can be grateful for what we have, but also for the things that we expect to come, and to make a ritual out of that, and not, there's no shame in that too. And I just love that idea, especially with your heart's deepest desires. Like start practicing gratitude for those showing up in your life. A really great professor of mine used to say, your deepest desires are placed there by God and they're for good, and I just thought, yeah, and it's, yeah. So I like the idea of future gratitude as well as the current present moment gratitude.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to add that gratitude in relationships is almost necessary for a relationship to work well. When I meet with couples and they're in a lot of crisis, a lot of times they are ignoring the good things that their partner is doing and only focused on the things that they're not. So it's almost an obligation, if you want to have a good relationship, that you're going to slow down and recognize those things and verbalize them, not just let them bounce around in your head, but be able to verbalize it so that your partner says, oh, you see all of me, not just the parts that maybe aren't as pretty or function as well.
Mm-hmm.
I created a family meeting template that I give to my couples and families as we work. And within that is a gratitude to who somebody is. What do we appreciate about somebody? And I really designed it really for like character. Like, what do you appreciate about who this person is? Not just are they a good, we keep using the dishes, right? Not like, hey, you do the dishes better than anybody, Now that is part of it too, because it's who they are, and then also a gratitude for what somebody has done.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times couples, they and it's funny because they'll do this and they'll skip right over that part and just get into like, how do we make our schedules work, et cetera. And like, did you do the gratitude part? Well, no, because we needed to do this. I was like, no, you need to do the gratitude first, because we intentionally lead with that, because it's needed. It builds that goodwill. It connects them together, and it lets you know that you've been seen, which is so important for anybody.
Absolutely. The being seen part. And that can be done with not just your romantic partner, but other people in your life, friends, bosses, just expressing your gratitude to your employees. Like it's so helpful to keep people happy and in cohesion and cooperative in however that relationship looks in whatever place it's in, whether it's at work or at home or, with friends. I don't think there's ever going to be someone who's going to be like, please stop saying being grateful for me or what I've done. I mean, it's so nice, and it does kind of lubricate the relationship.
It does, but it does have to be genuine.
Absolutely.
Like, if you're just throwing some compliment in there so that you can then give someone bad news, it doesn't fly, and people can see through that. But if you can genuinely say, I appreciate about this thing about you, then it does help hear that the rest of that feedback, whatever that might be.
Absolutely. And I've also heard of practices where you think about someone who's transformed your life or benefited greatly. And even if they've passed, to go ahead and just speak that out loud anyway, even if you can't speak to them. Like going back to what Matthew said, giving an expression, even if there's no one to express it to, just the act of saying out loud keeps your mind on it. This is why I'm a big fan too of praying out loud and just saying your desires out loud. It's because it's hard for your mind to wander if you're speaking out loud. I think in the car is a great place to do gratitude out loud. No one's there. It's just you, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. And in your head, spoken and written, those are all three different processes where your brain is working through something. So if you find yourself kind of ruminating on something where it's hard to break that, speaking that out loud or writing that down will help, like, take that to a different place where it
Mhm.
then has a different impact on you.
Yeah. I just want to remind everyone too, this is a cumulative effect. The more often you do this, like you raise your baseline happiness over time. You may not feel transformed day one of writing the 3 things you're grateful for, but if you keep it up, you will see changes in yourself and hopefully in your relationships. And maybe even in your bank account, depending on what you've been focused at and looking at. But anyway, thank you all for listening. Any parting thoughts, burning desires from the 2 of you before we close today? Takeaways?
I did, and I'm grateful for ADHD because sometimes it makes my life really interesting. Like when I open my mouth and I'm like, what was I going to say anyway? So, uh, but no, I think just listening, it's always great to hear from the 2 of you to bounce things off of this, and I think that really, the more that we can incorporate that and make sure that we're doing these things and putting it into our lives, hopefully the more that it grows. That's what I was going to say. There it is. I knew it'd come back around eventually. One of the things as this was coming up was if we're in a family situation or relationship situation, maybe where gratitude is lacking, a lot of times we can turn into this, well, I will do this when somebody else does this. And it almost turns into a stalemate. So somebody's got to give. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably the one working on yourself more than the other one right now, or hopefully you're working on it together and you're sharing this with each other and other people, hint, hint. But if you need that change, if that's something you need, you can also be that change. And I would encourage you, if you need encouragement, if you need gratitude from family members or from your loved one or significant other, start being more overt with that on yourself. Start putting it more out there. And a lot of times people will pick up, not always, but a lot of times people will pick up on that. And it starts to build that culture of appreciation because you're modeling it for those around you.
Mm.
So,
A lot of times I hear people talk about growing up in families where it was just expected that you would do the thing. And so they don't look for gratitude, but they're also not very good at giving gratitude. And I just really challenge you that you're probably with a partner who really needs that. And just the act of slowing down and saying thank you, it isn't just that that job was expected or was assigned to them. It's also you saying, I see that you did that. I get that you poured yourself into us or our family or our home or whatever it is that they were doing. Sometimes it's even, I notice that you're taking care of yourself, and that gratitude there. So just taking the time to learn this as a skill or practice or build it up as a muscle, like that is worth the effort of doing.
Mm. Amen. Well, thank you both. Remember to share with someone who needed to hear this today and maybe give some gratitude to them for the role they play in your life. And we'll see you next week.